Good afternoon, America, the greatest country on earth where hope springs eternal. Today's topic is eating real food. First up is Zen Honeycutt, the founding executive director of the great nonprofit Moms Across America. Many of you may have heard of that. One of the leading forces in the Make America Healthy Again movement. And we're honored to have you today, Zen. Welcome. Zen, so what prompted you to start Moms Across America?
So what prompted me was the fact that my children, all three boys at the time when they were quite young, my eldest was about 9, and then I had a 7-year-old and I think a 4-year-old. They were all sick. They had allergies, autism symptoms, autoimmune issues, asthma, and it was really baffling because their father and I never had those type of issues. We didn't know people with those type of issues. And all of a sudden in my mom's club, I was meeting other moms with kids that were allergic to pepper, strawberry, mangoes, apples, cheese, eggs, dairy, peanuts, walnuts, all kinds of things. And I eventually realized that it was not our kids. Something had happened to the food. And I came across on Facebook Robin O'Brien's TED Talk, Patriotism on a Plate, and also Jeffrey Smith's movie, Genetic Roulette, and watched those and realized that there were GMOs put in the food 17 years ago. The government did not tell us about it. And we were eating genetically modified organisms, which are foreign proteins, and our bodies were reacting to them. It wasn't until a little bit later that I learned more in depth about glyphosate and pesticides, which I'm sure we're going to talk about today. But the combination of those, and then in addition, later on, I learned more about vaccines and the ingredients in vaccines, were creating a toxic burden on our children that was undeniably, contributing to this major health crisis that we had in America. So I got involved in labeling GMOs, had the idea to start Moms Across America March to label GMOs after California lost our GMO labeling campaign, I think due to campaign fraud or election fraud. And I had the idea of joining into 4th of July parades to raise awareness and reach thousands locally and millions nationally in a single day by joining into 4th of July parades with big banners, that said Moms Across America March to label GMOs. So we did that, and it launched a website for $2,000 in February of 2013, and within 3 months had a reach on Facebook of over 300,000 a week. And we had 179 groups join into 4th of July parades in 37 states, and later had 600 leaders within the first 5 years create over 1,000 events in all 50 states. So we now have volunteers in every state, leaders that are taking on creating healthy communities, whether they are mothers or others, right? We support and educate and empower mothers and others with actions and solutions to create healthy communities.
That's awesome. And, the work is, I'm sure, very rewarding, and you probably hear great stories from a lot of moms. Do you have any, one particular story that you like to share?
Yes, I do. I mean, yes, there are hundreds, and we have a new website up now, by the way. We have testimonials by category, so you can see people who have recovered from ADHD and, chronic fatigue syndrome and gut health issues and all of that. But one in particular that I really like to share, and sometimes I share it at the end, but I'll share it now because you asked, and that is that a mother called from Santa Ana, and she told me, "You've got to keep doing what you're doing." Because, I'll tell you why. When my son was 8 years old, she said he had mental health issues, and she knew it. She told the school. They didn't do anything about it till one day the principal called her up and said, "You have to take your son home because he just threatened to blow up the school with a bomb." And she said, "Well, I told you he has mental health issues." And they said, "Well, all right, fine, we'll get him a psychiatrist." So he went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, surprise, surprise, "Here's your prescription for SSRIs." And she said, "What?" "Yeah, this is it, right? What about the side effects?" And he's just going to take this for the rest of his life. And he said, "Well, it's either that or you could look at what you're feeding him." And she said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "What are you feeding him?" And she said, "Well, hot dogs, quesadillas, burgers, pizza, chicken nuggets, right? Regular American food." She's like, "He's very picky. He'll only eat these things." And he said, "Well, have you thought about the GMOs, the pesticides, the food dyes, the synthetic chemicals, the preservatives, all of that?" And she said, "No, I'm just feeding him whatever he'll eat." And he said, well, you can either feed him organic or you can give him this prescription for the rest of his life. So she fed him organic, and within 2 weeks, and she was low income, single mom, 4 kids, Santa Ana, right? And in California. And so within 2 weeks, though, after feeding him organic rice and beans for lunch, packing all his meals, making his food, the principal called her and said, we don't know what you're doing, but this is a completely new human being. Keep doing what you're doing. And so she called me, she said, because, it was the day after the Florida school shooting. You remember that one? It was
Yeah.
horrific. And she said, my son is now 17 years old. He's of the age where he could go out and buy a gun at Walmart. And I know that he would have been one of the kids that would shoot up people at his school. But he's not doing that because he's eating organic food. He's growing food in community gardens. He's healthy. He's happy. He's responsible. And this is why you have to keep doing what you're doing. And I said, you know what you did? You created a new future for your child because you made the effort to feed him organic food and avoid those toxins. And you made a new future for your whole community because they're not mourning the loss of 24 kids that have been shot at their school. In fact, you've probably made a new future for our entire country because who knows what they'll invent, what type of service they'll provide, what type of love they'll give another human being. And right, what if they run for office or create a company that changes the world? So you are creating a new future every time. And I'd like to urge the audience to consider every time you make the effort to avoid toxins and to eat organic food and to get those toxins out of your house, you are providing your child and your family members with the ability to live up to their fullest potential. And that's why I do what I do in Moms Across America.
No, that's an awesome story. And um, you mentioned something that was one of the questions I wanted to dive into, and that is what impact do you think ultra processed foods have on mental health?
They are absolutely detrimental to mental health. You may not feel an immediate impact, although many do. They feel groggy and tired and headachy, irritable. Their stomach doesn't feel good. They don't digest well. They may get rashes over time. You may see that your skin gets more pale and flaky and not as pink and healthy. And you will probably see over time obesity, diabetes, neurological issues, neuropathy, and overall irritability can contribute to all kinds of health issues with, including obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and contribute to cancer because these ultra processed foods contain, according to our testing, Moms Across America has done a boatload of testing, which I'm sure we'll talk about, more toxins in these foods than nutrients. And that is the major problem. We have so many toxins in our food, in addition to low nutrition. This means that we are starving our American citizens of nutrients while we are poisoning them with toxins.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that, those toxins. I mean, obviously, we're familiar with food dyes and some of the petroleum-based chemicals that are in these food dyes. But what other types of toxins are we talking about here?
Okay, so I know, and I'm sorry this is bad news. I know people just want to be able to eat their Oreos and M&Ms and chips and soda and hamburgers and hot dogs. And, a lot of people say we're going to die of something. Yeah, I get that, we are. And a quality of life means better relationships. It means you're not snapping at your wife or your husband when you come home at the end of the day because you actually feel good and you're loving and caring and you have a beautiful life. So just consider that what you eat is really going to make a difference. What we have found is in school lunches, fast food, and military food, about 95%, all of them, positive for glyphosate. Glyphosate is the main active chemical ingredient in Roundup, Ranger Pro. It's used 280 million pounds a year on our food supply as both a weed killer and as a drying agent on crops just before harvest, like peas, beans, grains, wheat, barley, hops, oats. I'm sorry, guys, it's in your beer. And it's sprayed on GMO corn, soy, canola, sugar. So the majority of the processed foods you eat, the majority of the grains that you eat, even if they're not highly processed, but pasta, pizza, breads, they're all going to have glyphosate in them, unless you're eating organic. The other major, chemicals you're going to find are a variety of pesticides, like 2,4-D was the second highest that we found in gluten-free food. And 2,4-D is one of the components that was in Agent Orange, was sprayed all over Vietnam and caused multi-generational birth defects. We're also finding there's lower levels of atrazine. Atrazine is mostly in the water, but atrazine causes male frogs to turn homosexual, hermaphrodites, or asexual. And that is the number 2 most widely used pesticide in our food supply. And there's also dicamba, paraquat, diquat, very, very toxic, some of these chemicals that are being used in the food supply. And they all contain petroleum-based chemicals, many of which contain heavy metals, which are 1,000 times more acutely toxic than glyphosate itself. So there's a lot of pesticides that are to be concerned about. In fact, 86 of them that are used in the United States have been banned in other countries. And we believe this is mostly because the fact that the EPA does not allow, they're not allowed to, or they don't have a policy that allows them to study multi-generational impacts. So they're not barred from it, but it's just not part of their review process, right? They only review one generation and the babies from that one generation. They don't review the studies for third or fourth generations. And this is why things like the Agent Orange birth defects are, showing up now, and nobody considered this to begin with. The other toxins are heavy metals. They're, arsenic, cadmium, mercury, lead, and we're also seeing very high levels of aluminum and thallium. Thallium is an industrial chemical that shows up in leafy greens, which was what was found in my son that contributed, I believe, very strongly to his mental illness and his taking of his life 8 months ago. There was very high levels of thallium in his body. And aluminum is also very highly present in a lot of people because we believe they're spraying geoengineering. We know that aluminum is being sprayed as cloud seeding chemical to create rain. So we're finding very high levels of aluminum all across the United States in food and in farmland. And then the other toxins are veterinary drugs and hormones. All of these were found at very high levels, 100% military food, 100% positive for pesticides. By the way, 100% of those are made in China. 100% positive with heavy metals, sometimes up to 13,000 times higher than what the EPA allows. There were also veterinary drugs and hormones that are banned in other countries that are being found in military food, also found in school lunches and fast food. And some of these are so toxic, they're banned in Europe, Canada, and the United States. And so we can only suspect that these toxins these veterinary drugs and hormones are being found in the meat because it's from imported meat from China or Africa, is what I'm being told by military members. So we're very concerned about the levels of these toxins in the food supply, and for good reason. Our military members are being poisoned.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that because toxic exposure is a big, big issue. You mentioned Agent Orange earlier, and then there's a lot of things that happened at the military base, what they call K2 in Afghanistan, and with the burn pits and that sort of thing. So in terms of the food toxins, have you guys gotten involved in any type of detox programs, or are you aware of any detox programs specifically around those food chemicals?
So we have just been introduced to an Ayurvedic program called the Raj in Maharishi area in Fairfield, Iowa. And I had a sort of introductory detox program there. They have a lot of science. I don't have it to offer you right now, but I'm aware that they have a lot of science that shows before and after these heavy metals. They can, through this detox program, it's basically oils and food and a type of, oil from sesame type oil from 5,000 years of science that draws out the toxins out of your body. So that is something that has been used for about 5,000 years to detox people. And there's evidence before and after that shows that it can pull the toxins out of the body. There's also sauna. You can do a sauna if you can afford something like a detox program. If in 20 minutes of sauna is supposed to be worth, according to Dr. Edward Group from Global Healing, about a month of detox supplements. So get yourself in a sauna. If you can't get yourself in a sauna, go out and sweat, work on a garden, lift things, work out, exercise, and sweat. And when you're sweating, you are getting those toxins out of your body. Also bentonite clay, cilantro, spirulina, like, there's a lot of things that can activated charcoal can pull those toxins out of your body. It is important to follow a detox protocol, though, because sometimes people have a lot of parasites and heavy metals, and there's a certain order for doing that. I have used CellCore, which is a doctor prescribed detox supplement program that comes in like 5 different sections. It is quite expensive, but I just did the first part of it, and after that, I was hardly ever getting sick again. I was sick all the time before that, and I really believe it was because I had a tox burden that was was overwhelming me. I believe that the spraying in the skies can really be very problematic for people, and they have reactions, and their body gets overwhelmed. So there's a lot of detoxing you can do, but the number one thing to do is to stop exposing yourself to it, which is eat organic food, cut back on your alcohol and your any type of energy drinks or sodas, anything with food dyes, anything with high levels of heavy metals. It's important to look at what's in the food and start eliminating that first. So go to momsacrossamerica.org and go to our science page, and you will find all of our food testing, and you can see what types of food you should avoid.
Yeah, we get a lot of veterans that listen to this podcast. We have about 500 veterans in our program here, and they're very familiar with infrared sauna because, as you know, the toxins live in your fat cells. And so there was a protocol that was done that we've worked with in our program with infrared sauna and niacin that was started by Dr. Root, and they started it after 9/11 for all the rescue workers who were getting all the toxic exposure for all the chemicals and asbestos and everything from the collapse of the World Trade Center towers. And so they had set up a clinic there, and we've done some work with our veteran population that showed up in our work in 2021 when we did our brain health study with the Discovery Channel, and it really works. But it's really important to note that when you talk about detox, the infrared sauna is much more effective than just a regular sauna, and there's all kinds of information you can get on the internet about it. So what do you think the future should look? I mean, I know RFK is really doing a good job on getting food dyes out, the chemical food dyes out of our food. He's working now on a working definition for ultra processed foods. What do you think, if you were HHS secretary for a day, what would be your let's say top 2, top 3 priorities that we should be doing?
Oh, the number one thing that I would do, because I can't just ban glyphosate, right? If I'm HHS secretary, I can't just ban glyphosate. I would require truthful labeling for every single food product out there, and any other type of product, right? That falls under the purview of the FDA. That would mean batch testing, and every food company would have to disclose on their product if there's aluminum or glyphosate or 2,4-D or atrazine. They would have to disclose what their ingredients are in that food product. I think that type of level of transparency is, first of all, what was promised to us, was transparency. And also it would make it so that we can all be informed decision makers about what we're consuming and putting in our body. And it would also move the manufacturers in the right direction to source food that is not contaminated with glyphosate and toxins and heavy metals. And it would transform the food system if they just had to tell the truth about what's in the food. And then second of all, I would make sure that GMOs, genetically modified organisms, are classified properly. There's currently like a loophole at the FDA. They have classified GMOs as a process, not an additive. And by doing so, they gave them an out to not have to label them or to have them safety tested. Any additive, like sugar or salt, has to be labeled on a food product. but GMOs do not. There was a Supreme Court ruling that said, oh, food companies have to do a better job and they have to label, but nothing has been enacted. They were allowed to have QR codes for a little while, and that still didn't even really pan out. So Americans are eating, like 75% of processed foods has genetically modified organisms in them. 80% of those, by the way, are engineered to withstand Roundup or glyphosate. So a very high percentage of our processed foods, over 75%, contains GMOs, glyphosate, other types of toxins, and they're not being disclosed. So the first thing I would do is just say to the government, tell the truth.
No, that's a really good one. I mean, I think, like, having lived in Europe and for as long as I did, and when I was racing, the food quality over there is completely different than the food quality here. Like, when you eat like the most basic things, bread, butter, milk, they're completely different. You can actually understand and know what the ingredients that you're reading are on the food. And when you take out those chemicals, we haven't even touched on how those chemicals attack your metabolism and how that really helps drive obesity because of the different chemicals and high fructose corn syrup. There's a long list of them that are detrimental to our health, and it would be great to see either those eliminated, or at least be able to, when you do buy your food, understand what's in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's not, very realistic. I don't know. It's not very likely that that's going to happen, but it just seems like that would be a common sense thing, is for the food to be properly labeled, because there are a lot of people with chemical sensitivities, with, tox burdens of, say, high level of lead or high level of aluminum in their body. And if they were to know that a certain product, there are some chocolates that have very high levels of lead, right? And there are others that do not. It's not fair that we don't know which ones do and which ones don't, right? There are some baked good products that have very high levels of aluminum because they use aluminum as an anti-caking agent in some of the flours. It's not fair. It's not just, it's not right that we don't know which ones contain high levels of aluminum and which ones don't. So that's something that really absolutely could be done within 6 months by the FDA today. They simply could change a policy, post a statement on their website that food needs to be labeled completely and accurately with all contaminants and ingredients, and that could be done during this administration.
No, and if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in this administration. For some reason, people have this derangement syndrome, and they're anti-health. They advocate that these were all the quote unquote pro-science people during COVID, and now they're completely either anti-science or anti-health, and it makes you wonder. Have you ever heard of the app Yuka, Yuka? Have you ever heard of that app?
Yes, I have. I haven't used it heavily, but I have had several people tell me about it. I appreciate that there are apps out there that are supporting people to improve their health, to track what they're eating, to know what's in their food, all of that. I personally just buy organic as much as possible. I don't have the bandwidth to be checking apps like that for what's in the food. And frankly, also, I've tested thousands of samples of foods, so or maybe several hundred at least, and so I know a lot about what's in the foods.
No, and for the average consumer, the reason I brought it up is it's an app that I use,
Mhm.
and it's really for those listening or watching, and now or in the future, that what the app does is it has a camera. You take a picture of the QR code that's on every food product. So it's not necessarily on fruits and vegetables or meat, but like, let's say you want to buy unsweetened iced tea, and there's a host of brands of unsweetened iced tea. You can look through the QR code and figure out which ones, because you mentioned, they hide what are in these things. And what the app does is it helps you decide, or helps give you information on which ones are actually healthy and which ones aren't. Because everything says they're healthy, but then when you use your app, it actually tells you. So like if you're looking at let's say Pure Leaf iced tea or Gold Peak iced tea, there's a big difference. One is really good for you and one is really poor for you. And if you read the labels, you wouldn't know which is which. But because they don't label everything, as you mentioned, it really helps you make better purchasing decisions for a lot of products that people buy.
That's great. I'm all for that. And for me, if it doesn't have organic on it, I'm not buying it. So
Yeah,
if you can't afford that, if you can do that, I budget in such a way where that is a priority for me. Like I will buy consignment clothes. I will not buy a new TV. I will not buy the latest phone. I will go on camping vacations, but I will buy organic food first. So I would strongly urge people to use organic as your standard for what you're buying, or get water, right? Which can also be problematic and we don't have enough information about, but
There's no
we all
QR
do the
code
best
for
we
water.
can. Yeah, we all do best so you have to tell us now which one does you say is better of the iced teas?
Pure Leaf, and that's the one that I buy because
Okay.
because I didn't know that there was any difference. And then when you shoot the QR code and you look at I don't think you can see it on the screen. It doesn't show up too well, but it gives you like a red, yellow, good, poor, great, excellent stuff. So you can like look at like even like let's say you're eating you go to Trader Joe's and you want to get they have these really good spinach egg white frittatas, which is great for breakfast, high protein and everything. So just because I shot the QR code because I wanted to see just how good the quality was, and it came up excellent, and I was really happy about that because they're really good. And then there's other things that especially in juices, because of the sugars and stuff, you can really find out how bad some of these beverages are that you drink. And then there's other things like cereals or salsa, these different things that are fairly common that people buy on a regular basis. Different brands have different quality, and so it's really helpful. So you just hone in on which brands are better. We could do a whole podcast just on that. We'll go grocery shopping and use our Yucca app, and you can see like which are the things that you should buy and which are the things that you should stay away from, even in like the same category.
Okay, yeah, and it's a great start, and I think that is definitely something people should be doing, especially to avoid processed foods. To buy more whole foods with less ingredients, and just keep in mind that if it's not organic, if it's eggs, it's going to have high levels of glyphosate. If it's an iced tea, also could have glyphosate. They spray it as a drying agent, and on grains the chickens eat, the grains, that's going to have glyphosate in it. Glyphosate breaks down the blood-brain barrier and allows the other toxins, environmental toxins, to come into the brain. So it increases the harmful impact of any of the other chemicals that are in the environment. So not only are you being harmed by glyphosate, which is a carcinogen, an endocrine disruptor, it causes nervous system damage, neurological damage, damages sperm, androgenizes baby girls, causes liver and kidney damage. Not only are you getting the damage from glyphosate itself, it's also a chelator. It grabs onto the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches, and makes them unavailable. It's also, it's doing all of that. And if there's aluminum in your water, if there's lead in the meat, the burger that you're eating, if there's butadiene, which is a steroid that we found in 40% of hamburgers, it causes aggression. It's a steroid that they make, makes the muscle grow for the cow, but it also makes humans aggressive. So if you have any of those in your food plus glyphosate, it's going to be far worse, right? So anything that's not organic is likely to be contaminated with glyphosate because it's used as a drying agent. I mean beans, grains, peas, legumes, things like that. Not strawberries. They don't spray it directly on strawberries or things like that, but there's other pesticides on strawberries and grapes and other fruits. So the pesticides and the contaminants are not going to be on yucca, right? They're not disclosed by anybody anywhere. So this is why I urge people not just to go, less processed foods, but to go towards organic as much as possible. And I don't memorize the clean 15 or the dirty dozen. I know of some of them, but it's just too much for me to memorize. And I just buy organic as
Well,
much
no,
as possible.
I agree. That's why I try to make it simple for people. That, when you're trying to help people, you got to keep it simple,
Yeah.
fast and easy. So, because people have short attention spans, and like I noticed that the biggest difference when you talk about organics is when you're buying fruits and vegetables and meats,
Mhm.
and the ultimate when you talk about real food, right? I mean, it's like at its core, a strawberry is a strawberry, but not all strawberries are created equal depending on how they're grown and where they're grown.
Yes, they
So,
could have 52 pesticides on them if they're not organic, according to Pesticide Action Network. It's a lot. Yeah. So I
well,
just
no,
wouldn't eat them. If they weren't organic, I wouldn't eat them. I would prefer
yeah,
not to have them. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if people want to do a test, what I did, what my parents did for me when I was a kid was we used to grow our own tomatoes in the backyard, and
Mhm.
so we would take a tomato that we grew, and then we would take a tomato that you buy at the store, and you would have a taste test to taste each of the tomatoes, and then right away you would realize exactly what you're talking about. Like the tomato that you grew in your backyard actually has flavor. It actually has, it has a um, it has I'm trying to think of the word, but anyway, there's a difference there. Well, first of all, there's a difference just visually in the two different products, and then like in the taste, and it's just remarkable how much different it is. And so that's just one area where I think, you know, uh, having your own garden and growing certain foods that you eat like regularly, you can grow your own lettuce or
It makes a huge difference, and you really only need about 200 square feet per person to grow a substantial amount of vegetables per per person for a summertime. And I have a garden. It started out about, I don't know, maybe 500 or 600 square feet, expanded to 1,000 square feet for a family of five. I didn't have to buy any vegetables, over the summer. And when I went to a farmer's market, really only got like the sheep's cheese and the meat and maybe some whole grain bread or something like that. But it is totally possible to grow a lot of tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers, lettuce, greens whereas you don't have to buy those types of foods all summer long. And yes, you absolutely taste a difference, and you're tasting a difference because of the nutrients, and the
uh,
nutrients are so important. Can I talk about that for a little bit? Another thing about glyphosate I mentioned is a chelator, right? It grabs onto the vital nutrients of any living thing it touches and makes them unavailable. And they've shown that in farming with drift level exposure only of glyphosate, meaning if your neighbor is spraying it and 1/40th the amount of glyphosate gets onto a crop, it's going to reduce the nutrient uptake into the root of the plant by 20 to 85%, and into the shoot of the plant by 80 to 95%. And those minerals that are being reduced it's iron, zinc, and magnesium, and those are the stronghold of the immune system for the plant and for humans. And so what Dr. Don Huber says, who is a 60-year plant pathologist, he worked for NASA on biological warfare. He's a genius. He says that glyphosate essentially gives a plant AIDS. It gives it an autoimmune disease, and then the normally harmless bacteria in the soil kill it. And that is how it kills the plant. So think about the normally harmless bacteria, viruses, Lyme disease, mold, all of the things that are impacting Americans today, right now, that normally would not have impacted us. We are being impacted primarily because our food does not have the nutrients in it that it used to. You've probably seen memes out there where and this was 10, 15 years ago, you'd have to eat 70 servings of spinach today in order to get the same amount of iron that was in this can of spinach that Popeye popped open in the 1930s,
right.
Yeah, you'd have to eat 70 cans of spinach today in order to get the same amount of iron that was in spinach back then. That is primarily because I would assert it's, industrial farming, and also because glyphosate is being sprayed, it's being found in the rain, in the air. And this is why we advocate for it to be banned. The lack of nutrients is primarily what's making Americans sick. It's not just the toxicity. The toxicity is very important, but it's the lack of nutrients as well. This is why Every single person should be on a trace mineral supplement and a vitamin, like a multivitamin. Very clean ones, very good. Eating whole foods is important, but it's not going to have the same amount of nutrients that it used to have in the 30s, even if it's organic across the board. So you've got to eat organic, detox, and take some type of trace mineral supplement or multivitamin, well, both actually, in order to really give your body what it needs, and to support your immune system.
Yeah. So one of the people in our audience today is asking about how do you detox from glyphosate? Now you've already mentioned organics. What about like simple things like washing your fruits and vegetables before you eat them, or what other types of ways do you advocate for to detox from glyphosate?
Okay, well, washing will not help with glyphosate because glyphosate soaks into the product. I'm very sorry. I found this out. I was so mad because I was washing my fruits and vegetables, but then I learned that, first of all, it's not sprayed on fruits and vegetables. It would kill them, right? Glyphosate kills every single thing it touches, unless it's genetically engineered to withstand it, like corn and soy and sugar beets, right? The GMOs. So as far as glyphosate goes, you've got to avoid exposure to it. And then what has been shown in soil studies with bacteria, not in humans, but I'm going to assume for a little bit here that what happens in the soil is what happens in the gut, right, for humans. But there are bacteria out there, and one of them is called Acetobacter. It's a bacteria that actually breaks down glyphosate into non-toxic components. And it's found in apple cider vinegar, kombucha, and sauerkraut. So eating those three things or one of them every day could very likely break down glyphosate into non-toxic components in your stomach. We don't have scientific evidence of that because it hasn't been studied in humans, but it has been studied in soil. And there are a lot of farmers that are using it now to break down glyphosate into in their soil. And there's a product called Paleo Power that uses, I'm not sure if it's Acetobacter or not, but they use other bacteria from the deep sea and, Paleolithic, bacteria from a very long time ago that can break down glyphosate into non-toxic components. So eating a good bacteria can help detox from glyphosate. And there's a product called Glyphotox that is doctor prescribed, I believe, that has been shown to help to detox glyphosate. And there's a product from Thrive Probiotics. It's a spore probiotic that has been shown to improve the gut microbiome environment before and after exposure to glyphosate. So, if somebody's exposed to glyphosate, then you take this probiotic, your gut bacteria will improve in balancing. It will support it. And I believe it may take some of the glyphosate out. I'm not sure. There's a product called Purium. It's multi-level marketing, so I haven't partaken in it. They claim to help pull glyphosate out, but again, it would be pulling it out. It wouldn't be breaking it down into non-toxic components. So
Yeah,
I would urge.
Yeah, we've used Purium. Some people really like it. Some people don't really notice the difference.
Right.
But what about
I would mostly urge sauerkraut, kombucha, and sauerkraut and apple cider vinegar to support the body.
And what about like probiotics or yogurt or high fiber? Don't those also help?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there are times when I have taken probiotics or had my children take it, but keep in mind, most probiotics only have about 10 different strains. You're supposed to have 30,000 different types of bacteria in your gut. So you're really only giving it, a handful of the probiotics that you really need, but it can be helpful for short term. I wouldn't depend on them for the rest of your life. Also kefir, kefir and yogurt and different types of fermented vegetables are definitely, there's been science to show that sauerkraut does break down other types of pesticides. So I would strongly recommend including those in your diet. And if you look at how the Japanese eat, they are much healthier than Americans, and they include fermented foods with every single meal. So I would strongly urge you to consider food as medicine, yeah, in that way as well. And if you're going to have
that's a whole nother
raw milk, by
topic.
the way, or yogurts and all that type of stuff, if you're going to have dairy, I would strongly urge you to have raw, either A2 or raw, but definitely organic, regenerative, organic, and organic as much as possible.
Yeah, I think I think it's always a good idea to wash your fruits and vegetables, even if it's not from glyphosate. It's just from the
Yes,
pesticide
yeah,
residue
the
and
other
things like
pesticides,
that.
yes. Yeah, a little
That
vinegar, a little bit of baking soda, especially with berries and
baking
things like
soda,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, that can help, yes.
baking soda has been known to do a lot of good things.
Mhm.
Um, Now, have you ever gotten involved in there's a big there's two really sort of big I don't want to say fads because that might not be the right word, trends. We'll call it trends
Yeah.
around intermittent fasting and then also high protein keto diets. And so how do you feel about that in terms of health and do you do any of those things?
I have done intermittent fasting for a bit, and that does seem to help with, belly fat and potentially fatigue and all that. But I don't have the constitution, I believe, to do that on a consistent basis. I just don't. I just don't. My body doesn't love the idea of starving, and so I do. I don't do that on a consistent basis. It's just when I feel like I sort of need to detox and give my body a rest, right? Also, I feel like the paleo diets and no grain carnivore diets um, are primarily happening because people feel better when they avoid grain sprayed with glyphosate. I believe it is. I know it may sound like I've got glyphosate on the brain, but think about what's happening when people are eating carnivore or paleo. They are avoiding grains. And when they avoid grains, all of a sudden they feel better. Their mental health improves, their sleep improves, their immune system gets better. The primary thing that they're avoiding there is glyphosate sprayed grains. And so I would really be interested in looking at the studies that show, that people that ate a lot of grains back in the biblical days, 60 to 70% of a person's diet was grains. They were
Well,
fine,
it's like that in
right?
Europe too. I think
And
it's
in
more
Europe, yeah.
than just glyphosate.
Mhm.
I think it has a lot to do with the getting back to what we originally started talking about. It's all the chemical food additives that we put into our breads. As soon as you see the first ingredient is enriched flour,
Mhm.
that's a warning sign right there. There's no such thing no such thing as enriched.
Yep.
Basically what they're telling you is they've stripped out all the nutritional value of the flour and then put in a bunch of chemicals.
Yeah, yeah, but it's really important to eat whole foods as much as possible, and I really think that if you like, I've avoided gluten for a long time, and for a while there, I went back to eating ancient grains, and I bought a wheat grinder, a mill, and bought the wheat berries straight from the farm from a farmer that I know and ground them up and made some of the most amazing bread you've ever tried in your life. It's delicious, and that's the way our grandmothers made bread. And I, it's really just a couple ingredients, a little bit of oil and salt and yeast and flour. That's it. That's all that should be in bread. And some people mix in
No,
eggs because but that's
yeah, I mean,
it.
if you go to any store in Italy or like France lives off of bread,
Yeah.
literally lives off of
Switzerland,
bread.
bread and cheese, Switzerland, bread and cheese every meal, every meal. And
There's
you don't get fat and you don't get rashy, you don't get headaches. If you go to live in Switzerland or yeah, France or Portugal, I went to Portugal for 2 weeks. I felt so much better. It was amazing. And I had wine every night and I didn't have massive hangovers. I didn't have bloating or issues or, rashes or anything like that. So the food is definitely different here because of the way it's grown and the way it's processed for sure. Yeah. So just try to
and the
eat as
way,
clean as
yeah.
possible.
I mean, I lived outside of Paris, France for on and off for 5 years, and it was like,
Nice.
you know, the difference. I mean, I've also lived in Belgium, Holland, I've been all over Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and
Oh,
it's just a
dreamy.
completely different thing.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's just that's why it's really hard because I know one of the other big trends. Again, I won't say they're fads, but they're one of the big trends right now is a lot of people, especially in our group, like we have our own chat group, and people post pictures of things they bake and make, and I know that sourdough bread is like a really big thing right now.
Mhm.
I happen to love sourdough bread, and like you can buy sourdough bread, same thing. You can buy sourdough bread and it doesn't taste like sourdough bread, or you can get like the real like San Francisco sourdough bread, and it's amazing. And you
Yep.
can eat all of that bread and like not feel bloated or fat or anything.
Mhm.
And then the other stuff is just basically processed stuff.
Yes, yes, it's just junk food, and so that's the issue we have in America today. And we love America. My dad was a World War II veteran. My ex-husband, was in Iraq. My son wanted to be in the military. I'm very appreciative of military members supporting freedom in our country. And the fact is that we really we are the greatest country in the world, I believe. However, it's very difficult to say that when other countries have so much better food, right? And when they actually have, maybe not just free healthcare, but definitely more affordable healthcare, when they actually take care of their people. So that it's very difficult now to be 1,000% proud American because of the way that we have such a massive health epidemic and our government's not doing anything about it. I mean, they're doing some. The HHS is doing some, but the EPA is doing nothing. Not one good thing has come out of the EPA regarding reducing our exposure to pesticides during this administration, and that's what Trump said he would do. He said put pesticides in our food, autism, childhood chronic illness, and obesity. And he shook Kennedy's hand and he said he would let him go wild to make America healthy again. So a lot of people that were Democrat or independent voted Republican for the first time because Trump said those words. And nothing has happened yet regarding pesticides. So this is a very big issue for us. It may affect the midterms in a major way. And so if I were anybody out there that has Republican senators or representatives, I would, or any of them, Democrats too, I would be talking to them, emailing them, calling them, signing our petition, telling them that they need to do something about pesticides. And one thing that they can do is to address the fact that there's pesticide immunity shields in the Farm Bill right now that's supposed to be put up for vote towards the end of April. And we want to make sure that they do not allow the pesticide immunity clauses in the Farm Bill to pass. They have to take them out. So 10202, 10204, 10205, 10206, and 10207 have to come out of the Farm Bill. So we ask you all to please sign that. And we're very concerned about the Republicans because in the past there was a section called 453 in the House Appropriations Bill that gave chemical companies immunity from lawsuits. This means if your dad used Roundup in his backyard, on the patio, or a farmer used it and got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is what has happened to at least 166,000 people who have sued Monsanto over non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and the connection to Roundup. If this passes, they would not be able to sue and receive any type of compensation, which of course we know costs millions of dollars, right, for somebody to get cancer. And this is happening right now, and whether or not people sue is up to them. But this we think it should be available to them. For instance, Mark Dudla of Dudla Farms, his father was a 5th-generation farmer, and he got an awful flesh-eating cancer from agrochemicals. And when they ordered the chemo to treat their father, on the box it said the word Bayer, the same name of the company that gave the father cancer to begin with. And they had to pay $1 million, and they only got 3 years of life, additional life out of their father. So these chemical companies cannot have immunity, and we need to speak up about that. And we also have an event. There's an event that's being spearheaded by Vani Hari and Kelly Ryerson. It's called the People versus Poison rally, and it's on April 27th. And we invite you to come to DC and be outside the Supreme Court to tell the Supreme Court and this administration that we do not want chemical companies to have any type of immunity at all, which is what is being considered by the Supreme Court. There's a case called Durnell versus Monsanto, and Monsanto/Bayer bought Monsanto, is appealing the fact that Durnell won a lawsuit for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup. So if they are allowed to appeal, which is what this administration has suggested, that the Supreme Court rules in favor of Bayer/Monsanto, which is a tragedy. If that happens, then chemical companies will have immunity from lawsuits, and it'll end up like the vaccine situation
Yeah.
where
Yeah,
they
I mean,
don't,
that whole
they can't be sued.
Yeah, that whole situation needs to change. I think that the culture, you started getting into healthcare, but I think it's deeper than that. I think the culture of perpetuating illness, chronic disease, you know, if you have a problem, here's a pill. You mentioned in the beginning SSRIs for kids and how that is affecting. Like, it would be interesting to know, like, how many school shooters were on SSRIs.
Mhm.
Probably a lot.
Probably
You
all
know,
of them. I have seen
yeah.
statements saying that every single school shooter or mass shooter has been on some form of medication, some type of SSRI, psychotropic drug. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're really trying to work on a bunch of different issues in the veterans community, especially around informed consent and things like that around SSRIs. It's just hilarious that when you have depression or anxiety or PTSD, they give you an SSRI, and the number one side effect of SSRIs is suicide ideation or increased suicide ideation. And then they wonder why our suicide rates never go down. Yeah, it just boggles the mind.
It's insanity, and they keep doing the same thing over and over again. It's just money. And if you have watched the movie Medicating Normal, I highly recommend it. They follow a woman who's a veteran. I think it's about 4 people, but the main woman is a veteran, and she goes on one medication, a couple years after PTSD. And within, I think, 7 years, she ends up on maybe 14 different medications because they keep causing side effects. So you take more medication and side effects, and then they up the medication, and that doesn't work. So they give you another medication, right? So pretty soon you're on, 14 different medications,
Or
and
more.
which are causing, some of them cause permanent brain damage. They change the chemicals in your body and in your brain. And so they strongly urge to just not ever get on that toxic treadmill of chemical cocktails, and find other ways to support your body. There's Chinese medicine, there's acupuncture, there's Ayurvedic, there's homeopathic, there's essential
Uh,
oils,
there,
there's healthy
there,
foods, there's exercise, there's laughing. Some people, as a woman who had breast cancer in the movie The Secret, she watched a comedy show every night. Within 3 months, she had no more breast cancer. Did you know that you really, like, when you create endorphins, when you exercise and when you laugh, you create the actual chemicals in your body to heal yourself. When you go to the ocean, you're surrounded by negative ions. Those are healing. When you go to the forest and you walk in the forest for an hour and a half, that you are healing your body by being in the forest. There's a lot of way. Praying, meditating, you can heal yourself. Just like TM
well,
meditation, transcendental meditation has shown before and after scientific, and Joe Dispenza, his retreats, there is scientific proof before and after meditation that you can heal your body. We have the power
wow.
within our bodies right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been running this program for 17 years, and some of the things that we're most proud of is the fact that 67% of our participants reduce or eliminate their prescription drug use. I mean, the average veteran that comes into our program is on 8 or more prescription drugs, and it's just like what you were describing. And then one of our frequent contributors, Juan, he was on 15 when I first met him, and he still gets prescription, even though he doesn't take them, doesn't ask for them. The VA still sends him prescription drugs in these bags, and he's always holding up the bags. It's crazy, and again, it's we I'm not a big believer that we need a single payer healthcare system. I think we just need a healthier culture so that people are healthy and they don't
Good
need to
point.
go to the doctor.
Mhm.
That's what we need to be focusing on. I mean, it's so much cheaper to invest in health than it is to invest in prescription drugs or medicine. Like, we have a frequent quote that I quote, I think almost on every week's edition, is that we had this general who participated in our program, and he said the best prescription drug on earth is a bicycle. And you can spend money and buy one bicycle, and you never need any more prescription drugs, and it'll make you healthier, happier, and more fulfilled in your life. So, I mean,
I've never
we
heard
try
that
to
one
get
before.
out.
That's fantastic. So, Anne, I just need to add, I know a lot of, there are a lot of like vegan and vegetarians that run or they bicycle or something like that. But if you're vegan or vegetarian, and you're not eating organic, you're exposing yourself to the highest levels of glyphosate out there. So you could be exercising and healthy and praying to God, and eating vegan, vegetarian. But if you're not eating organic, you're getting high levels of exposure of glyphosate, and you could end up with cancer. So please just be mindful that eating organic is also a really big component of exercise, and also connection to God, and all the other good behaviors as much as
Oh
possible.
yeah, I
Even if you can
mean,
only switch out your grains, even if it's just your grains, buy organic bread, pizza, you know what I mean? And or cauliflower crust, right? Avoid the gluten altogether. Or organic pastas, organic crackers. Just start with just the grains, and I believe you'll see a difference in your rashes, your
well,
autoimmune issues like that.
yeah, yeah, make your own pastas and breads. That's what I would
Yeah.
recommend.
Yeah.
But I think diet is so important. I mean, as a professional athlete, I mean, we watched every single calorie that went in our bodies. I mean, every single thing, because it all, when you're talking about, especially cycling, where it's so hard, and it's an endurance sport, and you're out there competing for 4, 5, 6 hours at a time, like your body is a machine, and you have to feed the machine. And if you don't, the difference between winning and losing is like 0.5%. So no one was going to, skimp on the things that were going to give you that extra advantage. Now, some guys, they did some other chemical inducements, shall we say, but that's another story for another podcast, I guess. But I really appreciate you coming on the show. We had a few more minutes to wrap up, but I know that like I'm going to make sure all of them that's in our program. We'll post it on our channel and our social media and our group chats and stuff, and hopefully people will take the time to watch this and learn and do their own research and really focus on their health, because health is wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I mention something about military food?
Oh,
Now that I thought of,
go ahead.
so this company, Essential Provisions, contacted me. I have to be honest, I haven't tried this yet. I feel kind of bad eating something that I could save for, like if the stuff hits the fan. But it's organic and regeneratively raised meat and organic MREs, right, for the military. They do exist. They are out there. And my friend that has tried these says that they're really great. This is bison chili, and it's American raised bison. So I would strongly urge you to consider that there are organic options out there. The other thing I want to say is protein powders. I would avoid those, because a lot of the protein powders are made with peas or beans or soy that are being fraudulently labeled organic. So you're finding 54 parts per billion of glyphosate in organic, non-GMO, and conventional protein powders. This is what Detox Project exposed. So they're fraudulently labeling a lot of the soy and peas and beans organic, the dried versions that are in protein bars and protein powders. So I would avoid those as much as I can. I know that's probably a tough thing to say to military folks who are building up muscle, but you can get protein from straight from meat, from eggs, from hemp seeds. Those are whole, and you can grind those up if you want to add them, you know what I mean, to a smoothie or some type of drink. I would just use the whole foods, not the protein powders themselves.
Yeah, I used to say the original Power Bar was a Snickers bar.
Right. Yeah. Well,
But
the
when you
protein,
burn
yeah.
8,000, when you burn 8,000 calories a day, it's not, you need all the help you can get. You just got to keep stuffing food down your
You
gullet
need
and
some
just try.
regenerative organic steak. Yeah, is what you need.
I'm telling you, man, you get a steak in France and it's a whole different deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and Belgium and Holland, it's a complete. You might get steak, but it might not be from a cow.
Really?
It's just, yeah, one of my famous meals I was eating. I was on this Dutch professional team, and one of the riders invited me over to dinner with his family. So I went over and we had dinner, and we started eating, and we had this steak, and I was like, wow, this has the most amazing flavor. How did you cook it? And the mom goes, it's from the horse.
That's what I thought you might say. So horse is good? Really? I've never.
It was quite good. Yeah, I would
Wow.
probably have never eaten it if I would have known in advance that's what it was.
Yeah,
But
that would be a tough sell for me. Horses are just too intelligent and beautiful for me to consume. Bison I would do though. I have eaten
I,
bison. Deer, venison, if you cook it right, it's just delicious. So yeah, there's a lot of other, elk is very good as well. There's a
I was
lot of
going to
other
say,
types of
oh,
meat that Native Americans ate that are much healthier for you than these confined animal feeding operation pigs and cows that are being fed all types of not, they're GMO glyphosate sprayed grains, and they're pumped up with antibiotics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, your meat source is important too. I know I've
well,
given you enough bad news, though. The good news is that if you go organic within 2 weeks, you'll see a difference. Your rashes will reduce, your sleep will get better, your mood will improve, you'll be a nicer person to be around, your health will improve. And so I just give everybody sort of that challenge: 2 weeks, 100% organic. Do the best you can and see a difference. And I think that you will not go back. And you can go to momsacrossamerica.org for more information on science, testimonials. Join us in our Moms Connect calls on Monday night. And that those are informative calls, discussions. They're not just a show, it's a discussion, it's a Zoom call. So you can join in the conversation as well. And please donate and support us. We are a very tiny team doing a ton of work. And our moms are not all volunteers. Many of them are highly skilled professionals that need to be paid to get stuff done. So we hope that you'll support us at momsacrossamerica.org.
I
And
encourage everybody.
go to our social. My social media person would love it. I would say, please go to Instagram, X, Facebook, LinkedIn, Telegram. Follow us, share our work. We reached over 10 million people last month. We had over 2,000 mentions on mainstream media and reached with a reach of over 5 billion. So we've reached a lot of people, but we can only keep doing that if you guys support us and share our work. So we appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll like and share and subscribe to this channel, and hopefully you guys will promote
Yes.
this
Oh,
episode.
one more
And
thing. I'm sorry, I have to say one more thing about the military food for the vets, because I know so many of you are vets. Please urge your senators and representatives to urge Trump or sign our letter to Trump. We have a letter up to Trump to ask him, with only 2% of the military budget, it's 1.5 trillion right now, he could give a direct, executive order to say that the American military, the soldiers and the students need to get regenerative organic food. With less than 2% of the military budget, it would support farmers to transition, and it would support food being purchased and, given to the military, according to our, research. And so we believe that the American military members deserve the best quality food, just like they get high quality weapons and jets, and all of those contractors are paid top dollar, right? They are paid top dollar for any type of machinery or weaponry that goes to the military. Well, what about the farmers? What about the food? Why aren't they getting the best quality food? So we urge you to tell Trump and to tell your senators and representatives that American soldiers and American students deserve American grown regenerative organic food, and we can supply that. And that would be a legacy. That would be a transformation of the food supply and of the health in America today. So thank you for letting me share that one more thing.
oh yeah, no worries. And I'll just close with what we say here at LifeAid, and that is eat real food, touch the dirt, and build your community, and you will have a healthy, happy life. And soon we'll have some announcements on some of the new initiatives that we're going to roll out this year. But I'm really super excited about, Make America Healthy Again, the movement, and what you're doing with Moms Across America. Because I've been pushing the rock uphill for many years, fighting the entrenched mob, if you will, between big pharma, big food, big ag, and everybody else that thinks they're smarter and are actually, like you said, they're poisoning us. And it falls on deaf ears. But now we actually have a political force, and that's what it is. Is it a political force that is very, very needed, and we need more people to get behind it. And that's why it's frustrating for me to see people who advocated for science and everything else fighting us still. And maybe they're somehow linked or corrupted by the establishment of the people that we're fighting against. But I mean, we need more people.
It's all about money. It's all about money. So yeah, there's people. So we just keep going. I tell our moms, we are the river. There's a rock. We just go around it. We find another way, just like you do when you're cycling. You just go around it. And so we urge people to continue to do that. My book is called Unstoppable. It's on Amazon. It's transforming sickness and struggle into triumph, empowerment, and a celebration of community. So if you liked what I said, there's a lot more in my book about what you can do to be healthy, the labels that you can, discerning the different labels, how you can talk to your family and friends about GMOs and toxins in the food supply, and what you can do in your community to support your community. Because it's not just my children have to eat organic issue, right? Because my son's future spouses are out there somewhere. And if we want their reproductive organs to work, this is a community issue, right? If they want to, we want them to experience the profound love that it is to have one's own child. This is a community issue. So we urge everybody to get involved, to get yourself healthy, and then support your community to get healthy, connect with your community, and go to momsacrossamerica.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Happy Easter, everybody.